Chosen one. There's a reason the message keeps pressing through the veil. Heaven has been shaking the lines, urgently trying to get this through. For 2 hours, angels have been wrestling in the unseen just to bring you this truth. Elon Musk, in this divine metaphor, is not just a man of genius. He's a symbol of unignorable revelation, of disruptive awakening, of truth that breaks the silence. And now, here it is. They didn't just try to forget you. They tried to bury you. Because dead men tell no tales, remember? They had hoped you'd stay silent, forgotten, folded, erased. Not because you were weak, but because you knew too much. You held the truth they swore would never see daylight. You carried the evidence in your soul. The pain, the betrayal, the memory they couldn't erase no matter how many court documents they filed, or how many lies they rewrote. But here's where they failed. You didn't die. And what they underestimated most was that chosen ones don't just survive, they resurrect. Yes, over 90% of those who endure deep betrayal report signs of trauma. Yes, the silence was a weapon. Yes, the gaslighting was intentional. But what no one calculated was your refusal to disappear. Now, they're panicking. Because you're not only alive, you're awakening. You're remembering. And the message heaven has been screaming for 2 hours is this. It was never about revenge. It was about revelation. The court of heaven has reopened your case. And justice? It's not delayed. It's divinely timed. Chosen one, your name is not in a casket. It's on a scroll, sealed with purpose, drenched in destiny, and guarded by angels. They never wanted the truth to be revealed in court, you see, chosen one. They wanted you to be in a mental health facility, a body bag, or so inebriated that you couldn't spell your own name if you didn't show up for the court date. However, here you are, breathing, seeing well, healed, and entering like a heavenly summons. The amusing thing is that despite their best efforts to bury you, they overlooked one crucial fact. You are a seed, not dirt. It's a cosmic cross-examination, so hold on tight, because this isn't just a comeback. Someone is going to regret placing a wager on a soul that was designed to revive. Let's begin. To share the love of the angels, write Amen and contribute up to $20 with a super thank you. They constructed a coffin instead of filing a case. They dug a grave, not just filed a case against you. The purpose of this well-planned assault was to ensure that you didn't live long enough to defend yourself, not to settle a disagreement. Before the court ever heard your side, the charges, the dates, and the paperwork were all set up to deplete, shatter, and bury you. They anticipated quiet, a collapse, or a death certificate, not a fair struggle. The case was a disguised coffin, not one about justice. Consider this. Why was the court date postponed so much? Why are there so many delays, strange communication lapses, and abrupt coldness from individuals who used to say they cared about you? They were buying time, not delaying for it. Before you had a chance to respond, there was time for the whispers to spread, for the tension to consume you, and for your reputation to rot in public. They wished for your mental, emotional, and even bodily exhaustion. Who will survive was the main concern here, not who was correct. They bet that you wouldn't make it. To share the love of the angels, write Amen and contribute up to $20 with a super thank you. They used your history, your triggers, and your trauma as weapons. They gambled everything on you, relapsing or collapsing under strain, since they understood what you had gone through. They believed that you would just crumble in silence and save them the hassle of confronting the reality if they struck you hard enough and then vanished. But here you are, struggling and still living. They failed to account for it. Instead of collapsing as they expected, you examined the pattern. You became stronger, smarter, and more lucid. And now the day they believed would be your demise is becoming their exposure. The courtroom is now your stage, not theirs. And now your survival is causing the casket-like enclosure they constructed to crumble. To share the love of the angels, write Amen and contribute up to $20 with a super thank you. A part of their timeline was your mental collapse. They had a timetable for when you were going to collapse. They anticipated that every stage of your collapse would play out precisely, including your emotional quiet, social isolation, financial depletion, and mental crushing. They relied on it, not only anticipated it. The limit by which they believed you would be too broken to reply was what they dreaded, not the court date. The objective was to ensure that you wouldn't even turn up, not merely to win. They planned everything so that you would gradually fall apart, that the tension would mount until it was hard to breathe, that you would lose your appetite, your sleep, your friends, and yourself. They were cool while you were unraveling. As they watched to see how long it would take for the anguish to consume you, they remained silent, kept the paperwork going, and grinned in public. To share the love of the angels, write Amen and contribute up to $20 with a super thank you. They were counting on the damage, the type of emotional sabotage that doesn't need a judge, since it leaves you emotionally destroyed before you ever saw a courtroom, not whether they had a case. They wanted you gone, removed from your own tale, removed from the map, and removed from the picture. They didn't want justice. They felt that their own minds would take care of the rest, provided they remained calm and patient. The thing that hurts the most is that they trusted your fall more than they trusted their own lies. They believed they knew you. They believed your wounds were still open. They believed you had lost too much power to survive the battle. But their math was screwed up by you. Instead of collapsing, you changed. You were energized, not crushed by the pressure. They're sitting quietly now as they watch you ascend with power, clarity, and a calmness they didn't anticipate. They were hoping for a ghost, but instead, they had to deal with someone who survived hell and emerged as justice. A multi-person investment was destroyed by your endurance. A number of individuals worked behind the scenes to invest in your demise as if it were a collaborative endeavor. So it wasn't just one person wishing you would fail. They weren't only observing. They were actively working to destroy you, investing time, effort, and in some situations, even financial resources, to ensure that you failed to survive this legal storm. To keep their hands clean, several of them stepped back and fed the fire covertly. Others freely performed their role, believing that the audience would shield them. In any case, their shared objective was to destroy you before you could rise. It became a common dream that you would fail. Like a hidden currency, they circulated your name. They embellished the facts, created lies, and manipulated your life into a falsehood that they could all accept. The court date became their final destination, the day they anticipated celebrating your silence rather than just settling a dispute. They had late-night communications, whispered talks, and meetings regarding you. Once you were gone, they meant to either write you off entirely or leave you emotionally damaged. They didn't anticipate your survival. More than anything else, it rattled them. The whole process was destroyed by your very existence, breathing, healing, and remaining upright. They lost credibility as a result. It caused their tales to fall apart. They seemed silly as a result. It wasn't meant for you to be strong enough to continue. They're the ones in a panic now that you've reached the day they feared you would never see. Your survival made them realize that all of their time, money, and effort had been in vain. They needed you to break, but you didn't. You did not vanish. The strain didn't break you. When someone survives the thing that was meant to destroy them, the focus turns, and suddenly, it's them under the microscope rather than you. That's why they're the ones hiding, avoiding eye contact, and frantically trying to protect their identity. They didn't anticipate that the soul would have a resurrection scene. They dissected your background like analysts, researched your vulnerabilities like scientists, and based their strategy on the things they believed you couldn't endure. They noted your pain, recalled your breakdowns, listened to the people who abandoned you, and concluded that all of it indicated you were irreversibly vulnerable. They believed that your suffering served as a blueprint for your downfall. They failed to consider, however, that the soul is composed of something deeper, something they cannot quantify, control, and most surely cannot kill. They assumed that if your body was worn out, so would your soul. When they saw you in grief, they assumed you would remain there. When you became silent, they thought you were done. The fact that certain silences are hallowed places where souls recharge was something they totally overlooked. What they mistook for weakness turned out to be the beginning of an unexpected resuscitation. Because the internal death of a chosen one is a stop, a holy rebuilding, and it is never permanent. And when that soul rises again, it does more than just come back. It changes. That's what they didn't comprehend. You were linked to something limitless. You weren't just living on willpower. Your power comes from the divine, not from pride or ego, from a destiny that would not allow your narrative to finish this way, from ancestors who would not let you leave. They believed you had run out of alternatives, but you had reserves they were unaware of. A fire in your lineage that has been blazing for centuries, holy memory that kept you grounded, and divine wrath that held you upright. You returned improved, not just recovered. They find it frightening because they are no longer dealing with the version of you that they attempted to bury. It died. The resurrected one, the one who is not only alive but completely awake, is the one who appeared today. They also don't know how to stop it. Their spiritual life came to an end on the court date. This court date was more than simply a date marked on a calendar. It was a deadline they believed would be beneficial to them spiritually. They set the clock for spiritual combat as well as legal concerns. There was a time limit on everything they threw your way, including the manipulation, the curses, the evil eye, the gossip, and the emotional sabotage. They would imagine that everything would reach its climax just before this day, and by the time it did, you would be too damaged, too embarrassed, or too gone to show up. That was strategy, not an accident. Like a spiritual trap, they established their goals in the hopes that you would succumb to melancholy and delay. They combined religion with hatred, ritual with falsehoods. You will be done by today, not just silenced in court, but silenced in spirit, they promised themselves and others. However, the deadline they set backfired since authority changed more and more as time went on. What was supposed to make you weaker made you stronger. You were pulled inside by what was intended to isolate you, where you discovered a fire they were unaware you had. The illusion shattered more the longer the wait. Now that the day has arrived, they encounter a fully conscious, completely prepared, and fully living person rather than a dead ghost. The catch is that this court date represents their collapse, not yours. Their own deadline has turned into a spiritual reversal. Now, everything they predicted is coming roaring back. The energy they summoned, the deception, and the manipulation are all coming back to the sender in real time. They are now on trial, not you. What about the irony? This spiritual judgment cannot be appealed. No attorney, legal loophole, or ritual can undo what has already been started. Despite the court's legality on paper, this was always their expiry in the spirit world. Instead of revealing their own finale, they attempted to write yours. They didn't think your silence would be used against you. Like amateurs, they misinterpret your silence. They believed you were evading the strain, hiding, or collapsing. You were sharpening, however, not afraid. Not because you were helpless, but because you had nothing to say yet. You remained silent. You were observing every action, every falsehood, and every name that appeared where it wasn't supposed to as they ran their mouths and scribbled their stories. Your quiet was a tactic, not a sign of fear. They will soon discover the outcome of a quiet storm speaking at last. They never realized that your silence was premeditated. that someone was keeping track of receipts, observing trends, and recalling things that no one expected you to notice. You were keeping tabs on discussions, recording betrayals, and determining who was acting and who was in agreement. You weren't only getting by. You were constructing your case legally, emotionally, and spiritually. They believed they had enough time to rewrite the tale as they saw fit. They assumed you would remain frozen. But in reality, the stillness they perceived for weakness was you downloading everything they believed you would overlook. Just like someone who read the whole screenplay in the dark and returned with the red pen. You're now re-entering the scene. You're accurate rather than reactive. You're calm. You're not agitated. Delivering receipts with timestamps and supporting documentation is what you're doing, not punching people. They believed your delay to be the preparation of their expose. They became at ease because you allowed people to speak. You didn't yell, and you didn't publicly defend yourself. But you're back now that the court date has returned. And you've changed since the beginning of this. You're sharp, upgraded, and deadly when it comes to facts. The version of you that they believed they could quiet is now in control. And what's worse for them? You were aware the whole time. You only need to show there and hit play after allowing them to bury themselves in their own thoughts. They didn't think you'd go this far. Not emotionally, not intellectually, and most certainly not spiritually. It all depended on the idea that you would forget, that the trauma would leave you confused, that the manipulation would obscure your memory, and that the gaslighting would rob you of your clarity. They were betting that you would be too broken to ever patch things together, not simply that you would disappear. However, you did. And now everything they created is under danger just by being conscious and whole. You were meant to be too wounded to remember the specifics, confused, and numb. They anticipated that you would arrive either damaged or unharmed. They wager on the deterioration of the mind. They reasoned that before the truth could ever come to light, the burden of the past would cause you to collapse. But here you are, speaking with a calmness that pierces beyond anger, recalling vividly, and thinking logically. You took the evidence with you when you left the fire, not just the flames. A dramatic tale is not necessary. There is no need for you to perform. You don't even need to go into too much detail. Every falsehood they said is contradicted by your presence. Their illusion is shattered by you being here, solid, complete, and more piercing than before. You are proof that something did occur, and that someone lived through it without becoming what they experienced. Not only is it uncommon, but it poses a threat to the story. You're not narrating your tale in fragments, which is why they're twitchy and unpleasant. You are entering as the whole archive. You don't have any confusion about what transpired. No one is doubting your sanity. Furthermore, the truth cannot vanish, since neither did you. The fact that you are here, completely present, is evidence that all efforts to remove you were unsuccessful. They are now battling evidence in human form rather than accusations. Your very being is proof. Your survival is a rare, almost impossible occurrence in a system that often operates by hiding unpleasant facts under layers of denial and forgetting. It is little short of a legal aberration. They intended for you to vanish, to become a shattered reflection of your former self, to lose yourself in bewilderment. However, you disregarded those odds. You're standing with truth, memory, and clarity intact. You're not simply here. The whole system is disrupted by that alone. Memory is sometimes the weakest link in legal disputes, particularly those that involve severe trauma or spiritual warfare. The approach mostly relies on people's inability to remember, understand, or believe in their own experiences in order to reject their claims. However, you refuse to give in to that. Your mental state has been restored. You have good recall. Nobody can challenge the accuracy with which you remember every second, every detail, and every injustice. This puts you in danger not just on an emotional or spiritual level, but also legally. You are a living, breathing record of reality, not a hazy narrative or a collection of feelings. Your presence contradicts their stories, their fabrications, and their efforts to change the past. You tear down the barriers they put up to defend themselves every time you speak, and every time you remain resolute. You are the proof they wanted to destroy, not simply a narrative to tell. A quiet courtroom is created by your presence, and it speaks louder than any written record, witness statement, or legal argument. Confusion, uncertainty, and the belief that you will lose yourself in the process are what they depend on. But in that hazy system, your clarity is a lighthouse. It serves as a reminder that you are unbreakable, regardless of how many strategies they use, including intimidation, legal wrangling, and spiritual assaults. Their weak point is your recovered mind. This implies that your survival is a signal that justice may triumph even in the most adverse situations, rather than merely a personal triumph. You stand resolutely against powers that want to quiet and obliterate, embodying the strength of truth, remembrance, and fortitude. Your entire presence serves as the proof in every way, and they are unable to refute it.